Greta Thunberg has been named Time magazine's Person of the Year. So do you agree with this year's decision? Where do we sit on it this year, Jan?
Personally, I just think she should be in school.
The influence that she has now is quite scary.
Hi YouTube and welcome back to my channel. You're more likely new here, but if you're not, you probably know that I don't buy into the narrative of the modern feminism anymore. Not that I was ever a fan, but I certainly had and still have similar behavior, because ultimately feminism is women, and not only women, but also the flaws of women. I've spent hours on the internet to find out who feminists really support or celebrate. According to stylist.co.uk, the 2020 feminist calendar looked like this. Whereas it's true that it's good to learn about the women that had the guts to stand up for themselves when it was the most difficult, more often than not, modern feminists celebrate feminists, not women. Besides the International Women's Day and endless protests, nothing seemed to be celebrated really. And when I say celebrating, I mean women supporting women, for real. And supporting women doesn't mean parading every month in every capital city with flower power glitter on your breast. Or in other words, true support means anything and everything but festivals, parades, marching and protests. So two of the women from the Loose Women show seem to refuse to admit the efforts of young Greta.
At the end of the day, this is people at Time magazine all sitting in a room coming up with what they think is you know, the Person of the Year.
The award is meaningless. Person of the Year by a magazine is just, you know, it's a bit pointless.
And yes, I know, people have mixed opinions about this girl, but she definitely has some guts. As far as I'm concerned, her actions showed more courage than a lot of the 30-year-old freeing the nipple ladies on the streets.
There's plenty of 36-year-olds that have been saying this for 10 years.
Exactly, until a 16-year-old had the determination to confront the leaders of the world on her own. Who do you think benefits from allowing feminists to do how they please? Yeah, you guessed, whoever needs their votes. This type of influence is what scares me.
They shame us. They don't want us having power. They don't want us having power. Fuck that shit! We are all here today to make some fucking noise. And get naked.
So, if Greta should be in school, and the Times magazine should stop deciding who's their Person of the Year, what makes celebrating Women's Day so meaningful? How come that you should be awarded for being what you are, but when someone so young has the spirit to stand up for the world's issues and then being recognized by the world has no meaning? I sense jealousy. Feminists supposedly stand for women's interests, legal equality, physical autonomy for women, and against domestic and sexual violence, against exclusion in education, work and politics. What is the difference between these women's behavior and the toxic masculinity they want extinct? What is the joy of being a feminist, other than coming to the table with one long parchment of demands? Since feminists seem to focus on women's empowerment and leadership, how come that no one admires the women leaders of the world? How come that the only women that are being cherished are yet another set of displeased and embittered women that promote hate and violence?
And yet you're married.
Yes, I am. Often I say that I married someone and he happens to be a man, and it's not his fault, and he's doing the best he can.
Even though most likely the demands of women's rights have started based on true motives, continuing to behave from the same perspective as feminists in the 1900s doesn't make any sense. So far, the modern feminists have ruined their image, their relationship, and most likely other people's lives. How come that modern feminists don't celebrate women like Greta Thunberg, Barbara Corcoran, Joanna Shields, Alexandra Schulman, and much, much more. I bet you never ever heard about these women. Well, I didn't either, at least not from other empowering women. Could it be because they're jealous? Could it be because promoting true women leaders will pressure them into stopping demanding and take responsibility in getting on with their lives, realizing that most women have the opportunity to strive in the workplace without any more rights or movements will crush down almost the entire femi narrative. Which part of the society is restraining us from our identity, from our authentic self? How long do we really spend working on who we truly are? And even more important, what systems are put in place to teach us how to do that? So, how does an empowered woman look like? For reals now. Perhaps she's looking like someone that's willing to take responsibility.
I might take the responsibility for the bad ones. I'm much, much more comfortable to share the pleasure of the good ones, or to at least make the team feel that the direction forwards is a shared momentum and a shared movement forwards.
Someone that has integrity.
That when you leave a room that someone says good things about you. Not that you're liked necessarily, but that they respect the choices that you made and they feel like you have integrity. That's the absolute critical thing for me.
Someone with good self-awareness.
Possibly it's realising what you're not good at as well as what you are good at. So the moments where you realise that you're not going to be a great writer or you're not going to be a great director, that actually your best job is in actually supporting those people rather than in being them yourself. Maybe those are the moments that are more seminal and start to lead you onto a track which allows you to be really good at what you do.
Someone displaying courage and humility.
You have to take a leap in the dark and do things that you don't know that you can do. I mean, lots of my life has been about that. But you can't assume then that you're going to do it brilliantly or perfectly.
Someone good at building relationships.
Thinking that, you know, leave a situation always better than the way you found it. And so in business negotiations and things, I guess I've not always gotten the best deal for the company, but I've made a deal that the other person felt that it was mutually beneficial. And then over time, that works to your advantage, because over time, people will come back and do business with you again.
Someone that is able to listen as opposed to give orders.
In general, as an entrepreneur, I find I'm the boss lady. But if I just said, do this, do that, nothing would ever get done. So most of my time is spent listening. How shall we approach this? Could we do this? What about doing that? And when you have that sort of discussion with people, they grow in stature and the team grows in stature.
What cannot be sustainable is when women insist and demand to have a man's life and career, which can result in a lot of stress, burnout, missing out on being a parent, and even worse, in infertility.
That you went through some of the rigorous training that the men did, and what happened to you?
I've faced a lot of weight loss, muscle atrophy. I also developed polycystic ovarian syndrome, which for me resulted in infertility. It's a type of combat environment these days that's very strenuous, and I was only doing a portion of what our infantry brothers do. I'm physically fit, definitely one of the top in the females for physical fitness. However, I degraded, and of course I understand that every female is going to break down at a different rate, but our male counterparts are breaking down also, and I just think it's an unnecessary risk that we could be taking on.
If that wasn't clear yet, I identify as a woman, and the hypocrisy of women's narrative gets me. It gets me the fact that we celebrate freeing the nipple without any kind of concern about how grotesque our behavior comes across, the manipulation and the lies we tell ourselves and to the world. It gets me that the only thing empowered in these movements are just narratives that comfort our ego and makes it impossible for us to connect with each other. Words like harassment, abuse, rape, and assault are thrown like dust in the wind and almost don't weigh anything anymore. It's true. acts of rebellion have shaped the modern world, but protesting for the sake of making yourself feel better that you're contributing doesn't make the world a better place for the women that really need it. I've learned that only through chaos the world will change, but at least one should be honest about their acts and behavior, and ought to stop hiding between narratives that pamper the ego. In other words, if you're a woman and you want to dominate the environment, you're welcome to do it. Put a t-shirt on, hustle, sweat, compete. In the real world, not in front of the White House. And these women have proved it.
When I'm talking to young women, they will ask me, how do you get ahead in a male-dominated industry if you're a woman? The advice I always give is to forget you're a woman, right? That you are a person with a good idea. Just say it.
That hurt to be told I was silly, stupid, naive, pick your adjective. But I also knew that there was great truth in what we were trying to do.
People didn't want to get on board. People didn't want to support. People wanted to say, oh, that's silly, it's niche, it's never gonna work. She's just this, she's an opportunist, every word in the book.
And the time it feels crushing.
Men are 4 times more likely than women to ask.
What do you think the biggest barrier is for young women today who are trying to succeed in the workplace?
I think one of the barriers is sometimes not believing that you can necessarily do it.
So why don't we have the life we dream to have? Is it because patriarchy, our lost father, the bullies in school? Because our colleagues mock our femininity? Because the construction workers are whistling at our bare legs? How many more excuses do we need in order to cover up the fact that we haven't become the person we can potentially be? How many more rights do we need to have? How many topless protests do we need to start before we'd really start to look at ourselves? For every finger we point out at the world, we point 3 back at us.